When most people think of Tokyo, they think of glittering neon, of opulent fashion, and ultra-modern technology. But I visited a neighborhood that shows a different side. Cut off from wealth and consumerism, this is a place with the reputation as the poorest neighborhood in Tokyo. Sanya. The kanji mean mountain and valley, but look as hard as you want, you won't find them on any map. You won't find them written anywhere, really, except maybe graffiti. Despite having 2 centuries of history, from the era of samurai to the present day, this place doesn't exist, at least not officially. So, what happened? In the Edo era, Japanese Buddhism had a taboo against killing mammals. This created a contradiction. Society needed butchers, tanners, leather workers, but at the same time they were stigmatized for their labor. A caste system developed, and these lower caste individuals were ostracized and discriminated against. Called burakumin, they were forced to live in ghettos on the edges of towns or on riverbanks. One place a burakumin community developed was on the northeastern outskirts of Tokyo. Across the road was a district dedicated to sex workers, Yoshiwara. Nearby was the Kozu Kappara execution grounds, where criminals were put to death. Executing people and cleaning up the bodies was another taboo activity relegated to the burakumin caste. Even today, the main intersection in Sanya is called Namidabashi, Bridge of Tears, because it was the place the condemned and their loved ones would weep before saying the final goodbye. As the Meiji era began in 1868, discrimination against burakumin people was no longer enshrined in the law. Informally, however, it continued well into the 20th century, and some would say still continues today. A rapidly modernizing Japan needed cheap labor, and Sanya became home to a large population of workers. During and after World War II, the area was used as a tent village for those displaced by the bombing of Tokyo. The temporary accommodations gradually transformed into short-term, simple, hostile dwellings. By the 1960s, a new Japan was ready to shed the past and show itself as a liberal democracy. Tokyo was becoming one of the major cities of the world, the capital of a modern and economically prosperous nation. This image of Japan was front and center during the 1964 Olympics. But hidden under the surface, many different tensions were playing out. Just like in the United States, the 1960s in Japan were a time of social strife, when those excluded from society demanded change. By the 1960s, Sanya had become a district for day laborers. More than 300 cheap hostels called doya had been built. The workers who lived here often worked in construction. Quite literally, the people who built the modern Japan that was being shown off in the Olympics only a few kilometers away. But these workers were exploited, paid poorly, and after the work was done, they were tossed aside and forgotten. These negative social conditions led to protests and riots. In 1960, one riot overtook the police station. In 1967, another riot was covered by the New York Times. The article states that the residents of Sanya and similar depressed areas of other Japanese cities have been passed over by the affluence generally associated with the nation. Many of the embattled slum dwellers belong to the disadvantaged Korean community and to a Japanese minority called the Eta, an outcast group often likened to the untouchables of India. Eta is an outdated term for burakumin, now considered derogatory. Blaming the riots on alcohol, the heat, or outside agitators, the government cracked down. In 1966, the government ordered the name Sanya erased forever, and the district was split in two, renamed as Kiyokawa and Tsutsumi. This is why you won't see Sanya on a map today. However, little was done to address the root social conditions that led to the riots. The 1980s saw another economic boom sweep Japan, and predictably, the rewards weren't felt by everyone. The citizens of Sanya weren't only used by corporations and repressed by the police, they were exploited by Yakuza syndicates as well. A filmmaker named Mitsuo Sato began making a documentary on the intertwined role of the Yakuza, police, and corporate labor exploitation in creating the conditions in Sanya. In an effort to silence him, in 1985 he was stabbed to death by a Yakuza gangster. His colleague, Kyoichi Yamaoka, continued filming. In 1986, he was gunned down as well. Despite this, the film was still released under the name Yama, Yama being an alternative way to read the kanji san of Sanya. Today, you can still see the signs of this long history in Sanya. There are tons of cheap hostels and halfway houses, and you can see homeless and day laborers on the streets. Out of respect, I didn't film the locals, but I was able to chat with some and hear their story. One man showed me his pet lizard. Some were collecting cans to redeem for a few yen, others were getting drunk at 10 a.m. Most of the people are older, no longer day laborers, but scraping by on meager pensions. Gentrification is also occurring. It's not uncommon to see new construction next to rundown buildings. A number of the hostels have refocused as cheap lodging for foreign tourists. The old history and culture of Sanya is disappearing. Yet there are calls for change. The area was plastered with election posters for the Japan Communist Party when I visited. In 2015, there was a demonstration on the 30th anniversary of the death of the slain filmmakers. Others have started community organizations to assist the poor and advocate for them. Members of these groups also founded a cafe called Sanya in an effort to reclaim the tarnished name. Whether a real change will come or gentrification will simply displace these problems, creating a Sanya somewhere else, only the future will tell.